Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Cintia. Estoy aquí con la CLC, que es la Cooperativa del Lenguaje. Estamos aquí para abrir un espacio donde se pueda hablar el idioma de su corazón. La interpretación que voy a hacer se llama simultánea, que es, yo voy a hablar inmediatamente al mismo tiempo que el presentador. Si tienen preguntas, por favor levanten su mano. Si están hablando muy rápido, también yo voy a levantar mi mano para preguntar y pedir correcciones, porque soy humana y a veces las palabras necesitan correcciones o sugerencias. También sí pueden tratar de no hablar encima de otra persona, porque es más difícil para nosotros saber quién está hablando o qué es lo que se está pasando. Y este es un lugar donde ustedes pueden expresarse y hablar. Todo lo que digan va a ser privado, no se va con nosotros. Y voy a decir esta misma presentación en inglés para que las otras personas nos escuchen. El equipo que ustedes tienen es parecido a este. Hay una bocinita que va sobre su oído. Si quieren subir el volumen, van a dar para este lado. Si quieren bajar el volumen, van a dar para este otro lado. Y hoy no tengo las cosas que se usa para colgar, pero lo pueden poner en la mesa para que no les esté estorbando. Y como les digo, voy a hacerlo en inglés. Hi, my name is Cynthia. I'm here representing the CLC. We're trying to open a space to speak with the language of our hearts. We're going to do a simultaneous interpretation, which is I'm going to be speaking at the same time as the speaker of the presentation. My words go fast. So we are also opening a private space where you guys can speak and say whatever you want. Nothing walks away with us unless it's open for everybody. And the equipment looks like this. Is a little bit smaller for you guys. If you want to raise the volume, you have to use the left side. And if you want to lower the volume, it's going to be the right side. If you have questions, please raise your hands. If I have questions, I will raise my hands. Sometimes people speak a little bit faster than what I can interpret. And what else? Or something else. I think that's all. But please don't speak on top of each other, because that makes it very difficult to know who's saying what and to follow you. And that's all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Cynthia. Hola a todos. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. We are all with 350 Colorado, and I know that the majority of you are all with the EPAC committee, which is awesome. Oh, I thought you were going to say something. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so we're going to be giving our presentation today, specifically on giving public comments. And I know the EPAC committee does have a goal of giving public comment to City Council after this, in order to make your committee a more permanent fixture in the county, which is amazing. So with that, I think we're going to do some introductions. One thing I will say before also, there's time for questions at the end, but if anyone has a question, if anything comes up during the middle, feel free to raise your hand and we can always answer questions as we go as well. So I will start with just introducing us. If you all feel comfortable and want to introduce yourselves as well, great. My name is Victoria. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm located in Denver. And I'm the Denver team coordinator, and I help out with the Suncor Action Committee with Lucy Molina. And I'm going to pass it to Shelby.
Hi, I'm Shelby. I'm from Arvada, Colorado. I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, and I'm a volunteer with 350 Colorado. I'm going to pass it to Chelsea.
Hola a todos, me llamo Chelsea. Hi everybody, my name is Chelsea. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I live in Golden, and I'm the movement building and volunteer director with 350 Colorado. So just an extra thank you for you all being here, and to Rosemary and everyone on the EPAC for coming. It's fantastico. I'll pass to Valley.
Hello todos, me llamo Valle. Hello everyone, my name is Valley. I am the Movement Building and Youth Action Committee intern. I work with Chelsea and just finishing up my degree at CU Denver and excited to be here with you all today.
Awesome. Yeah. We have a couple of other 350 volunteers with us today. Alexa, you want to go ahead? Dan, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot to introduce yourself. Awesome. And if anyone in the group feels comfortable, wants to introduce themselves, please feel free. Yeah.
I'm Trudy Smith, I'm from the EPAC committee, and I'm grateful to be here, Victoria.
We waited for you.
We knew you were coming.
I'm Laura Hillwell. I live here in Commerce City, also.
Awesome.
Más miembros del IPAC.
Yes, hi, I'm Darcy Martinez. I'm with EPAC. I'm also a newly appointed board member of the Environmental Justice Advisory Board in Colorado. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank
And I'm
you.
also with the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environment. A little over 5 years. I know she won't introduce herself, but this is Belen. And
Hola.
she is the lead of her school reach.
Ooh, yes.
It's amazing.
Qué bueno.
Green team.
Hola, yo soy Armando Barcelona. Vivo aquí en Kansas City. Soy miembro de Cultivando.
Bueno.
Qué bueno.
Gracias por estar aquí.
Mi nombre es María Subiati. María Subiati.
Cultivando también.
Bueno. Gracias por esta una promotora también. Es muy importante.
Yo soy Guadalupe Villalobos. También soy promotora Cultivando.
Ah, qué bueno.
Y con nombre sí.
Gracias. Bueno, thank you. ¿Sí, alguien más?
La Lucy.
Rosemary, you want to go ahead?
Hola, mi nombre es Rosa Peligrosa. Estoy profesora y hablando de ambiente. Y trabajo en
Gracias.
Rosa Pinterest. I work for the city. I'm an environmentalist. And I'm a lawyer. And I work for you. I work for the.
Trabajo para ustedes en la ciudad.
Gracias. Bueno.
Oh.
Sí.
Yeah.
Whatever you want.
And I just want to share that right now, I'm actually in a testimony right now.
Eso.
So, it's literally 2 minutes. You learn all that. They're still going on. And see a progress. Disproportionately impacted communities on the CPHE
Wow.
around like the same time.
Gracias, Lucy.
Sí.
But there's a second one on October 9th, and it's on the website.
So you will be ready to testify for that.
Correct. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And thank you all so much for being here today as well. All right, so we're gonna start off with just talking a little bit about 350 Colorado. For anyone who isn't familiar with who we are the largest grassroots organization, nonprofit in the state that's focused on helping to solve the climate crisis. Yeah. No, take your time. I'm sorry, I didn't notice. You're good. All right, I'm gonna start from the top so no one misses it. For anyone who isn't familiar, we're gonna talk a little bit about who 350 Colorado is. So we are the largest grassroots nonprofit in the state focused on solving the climate crisis. And just a little bit about our mission right there. So very focused on building the local grassroots movements and a just but swift transition to a sustainable future. And we have 3 pillars of action that kind of go with our theory of change. So first would be movement building, doing things like this, going out, building community, building out our organization, the number of members who we work with, working in education, things like that. And our second pillar, keeping fossil fuels in the ground, is a lot of the work that we do surrounding Suncor. And I know a lot of you are familiar with that work. So promoting, just as I said before, just but swift transitions away from fossil fuel sources. And that kind of leads us into our promoting solutions pillar, which has to do a lot with climate friendly policy, promoting renewable energy, renewable agriculture, things like that. So that's a little bit about us and who we are. And now I am going to pass it over to Shelby to talk a little bit about the climate crisis.
Thanks, Vic. So one of the main reasons that I started volunteering with 350 Colorado is because I was concerned about the climate crisis. So in the past, when I've given public comment, I have focused a lot on climate change and global warming. So we're gonna get into a little bit about that right now. Greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane, are released by burning coal, oil, and gas. These gases trap heat and warm our atmosphere. So you can see this on the graph here on the right. So the red bars are showing the temperatures that are above the long-term average, and that's in Fahrenheit. And the blue bars are indicating temperatures that are below the long-term average. And then the black line that goes up is the concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And that's in parts per million. So you can see over time, as carbon dioxide has increased in our atmosphere, the global temperature has also increased. And we hear a lot these days about 1.5 degrees Celsius. So what exactly does this mean? 1.5 degrees Celsius is the goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, which is to limit warming to 1.5 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels in order to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. So does anyone know where we are at right now in Celsius?
What do you think? No wrong answers.
No wrong answer. Who was that? Yeah, so here we're just looking at the difference between pre-industrial levels and where we're at now, as far as how much global warming we've experienced. So last year, we were at 1.1 degrees Celsius. So getting very close. And then 350 parts per million is the acceptable limit of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So does anyone know where we're at on that scale? Hundred? I wish, yeah. No. So we're actually at 415 parts per million right now. And unfortunately, even though we have these goals outlined, we're actually on track for a 16% increase in emissions by 2030. Okay, so in addition to the concerns about our planet, increased emissions and greenhouse gases also cause many health problems. So exposure to pollution increases your risk for lung cancer, asthma attacks, respiratory infections and illnesses, heart attacks and strokes, developmental and neurological issues, lower respiratory infections in children, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and also increased instances of birth defects and lower birth rates. All right, so this next slide shows a link to an interactive map that was created by the Clean Air Task Force. It shows air pollution impact from diesel. You can see the different colors. The key is right here at the bottom. So the highest impact will be darker red. And then it also on the left-hand side shows the projected annual health impacts based on your location. So you can see, well, you can kind of see on this at least, Denver is very dark red. So there is lots of diesel pollution impacts in our area. And they've also projected 15 deaths to be related to diesel pollution in 2023. So there are many other environmental concerns from pollution in the Denver area. The North Front Range has been above the EPA threshold for ozone since 2008. And the EPA actually recently lowered our air quality rating in the Denver Metro and Front Range area from serious to severe. And Suncor, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, is also responsible for a lot of the pollution around Commerce City. So Suncor pollutes North Denver with hydrogen cyanide, which is toxic, benzene, which is cancer causing, and ozone forming chemicals. They also use firefighting foam to put out large fires, which contain PFAS or forever chemicals and can contaminate groundwater and soil. Another source of pollution is fracking of oil and gas wells. These operations release methane, which warms the climate faster than carbon dioxide. And this also releases ozone-forming chemicals and other toxins. And forever chemicals have also been linked to Colorado oil and gas wells and could result in contaminated groundwater. So these environmental impacts do not impact everyone equally. The 80216 zip code is the most polluted area in the US and is primarily Latino. Asthma hospitalization rates are 40% higher for children living in North Denver. And then life expectancy also varies as much as 13 years, depending on where you're living in the city. Globeville residents and specifically have a life expectancy about 6 years below the average. So hopefully now you're all fired up to learn about what we can do about these issues. So I'm gonna pass it off to Chelsea. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Shelby. Fired up, concerned, all the feelings, maybe. You all are the experts of your community though, and we would love to hear from you all. What instances of health concerns, environmental concerns, and environmental injustices have you seen here in your community? And I'll just jot a couple of them down so that we can visualize that we all share these issues and live these issues, and very likely, yeah, in ways that we don't expect. So, sí, ¿quién compartir?
COVID.
Health concerns, COVID, sí.
That Darcy was talking about.
Sí. Asma en los niños. ¿Qué más?
I am new, but it took about 2 seconds to realize that South Commerce City faces a lot more racism and environmental injustice than North Commerce City. We see solutions to that, but refineries there, they're not gonna leave. But wondering why city council continues to ignore serious health concerns there.
Exactly. Just in Commerce City alone, not even just Denver as a whole, but here in your community, that line divides. What else?
We definitely feel, I'll share a story. So in 2019, when the fires were nearby and it was, we were actually in your park, she was taking a mariachi lesson and it was COVID, so they were doing it outside. But the pollution was so bad, you couldn't see down the street. And your park, and you can't see from the people, we couldn't see from one people to the other, it was so bad. And we just were like, okay, well, we can't do this, it's too bad, it's not healthy. But if you looked across the street, the flares were still going, like they're adding to that with orange, you really could not see down the block, and they were still flaring. And I was like, why couldn't they shut that down for one day? It was like 100 degrees, it's terrible in the summer. Like why could they be like a good neighbor and be like, we're obviously suffering, can we shut this down for one single day or do something else? But I just remember seeing that just added to my feeling of what do we do? Can we be outside?
Yeah.
And the kids were inside because they have COVID, so they were not going to school, so they were inside and go inside and outside. Very much a feeling of despair.
Thank you for sharing that. That's real. Non-drinkable water.
I, in the mail, I got a letter from South Adams saying, the water is safe. As like in EPAC learning, it's actually not that safe. So interesting, the like false security.
Información que no es verdad. Yeah, untrue situation. Wow.
So the reason they say that, for people that don't understand, is that it's not a legal limit, it's a health advisory. So the health advisory is like 0.02 and 0.004, and ours is at like 13.
We have an EPAC member who's also a member of the water board. And so he attended one of our meetings and we asked him what are they gonna do about it? And he said dilute it.
No sé cómo se dice dilute.
So
Diluirla.
they're buying water from Denver to get it, to try to get it under the regulatory guidelines.
How does it increase the regulation?
Yeah.
Lower system.
Yeah, so EPA lowered it to 170 and then it went down to like less than 1%. But ours is at, for fast and too close. One is at, one, they're at,
We just got an increase in our water bill.
How recent? Last month?
This month.
Red, rojo para.
They're just talking about the impacts. Okay, so it's like, constantly, it's like that pothole on the road, it's always, eventually it's gonna sink, right? Same thing with everything that we're drinking and smelling, it impacts, I mean, it's throughout not 1 year, how long you say you've been, a long time? Since 1980. So how many years have you been drinking the water, smelling the air, and how does that impact your health situation? Now, that is environmental injustice because it is not fair. Now, you have to deal with the same situation. It's not fair that this whole other generation has to deal with it.
Sí. Específicamente en la nariz. Sí.
So another issue is Civitas has applied for 2 well plans within Commerce City, and so that is 46 wells. So each well, every time they frack a well, that's 10 million gallons of water that can never be used again. So that will come to city council. So when it comes to city council, and the
So,
water bill is, that's when people need to show up.
that's right. Well,
Because
we'll,
they're gonna vote on it, and there's
wanna,
the majority of our city council. We're at Marshall's. So that would be a really important thing. And I think they're trying to reassign those permits, but right now I have this.
I think this is why, like, workshop is important for us to learn. So we can show up to testify. Right now, this one, right now is BPHE, it's about permits. It's about the permits and it's unfortunately happening. So we should show up.
yeah,
as a community.
which is a perfect segue. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I feel like when we can visually, cumulatively see the impacts, it just might kind of push us to that activation we need. So just trying to keep that in mind for us, that we all share these issues. ¿Nota?
Creo que también hasta antes de este involucramiento, la mucho tiene que ver con ¿sí? Era la falta de información a la comunidad latina, porque nadie estaba
Exacto.
trayendo información en nuestro idioma, entonces había un desconocimiento
acerca de todas estas injusticias que estaban sucediendo. Creo que eso es algo que pues era algo muy grande, era algo que impactaba mucho.
One thing along with that is the access. Not only is it not in Spanish, but
Yeah,
often
otros idiomas.
what they do post on the agenda makes no sense. It's like permit number, blah, blah, blah. They vary it almost in the agenda, so I don't feel like I can look at the agenda and say, oh, this is the vote that Rosemary's talking about, I need to show up on that right now. Because it's. I'm trying to.
Yeah. Cynthia was saying that it's not just no language access, not in Espanol, but in other lenguajes también. And the more we can do to share those resources and provide opportunities for us to hear from each other, we're pretty convinced that that's how you get to change. And hopefully we can bring you along in that vision as well, if you're not already there, because I'm hearing, I think that you are already there. So yeah, that was perfect. Thank you so much for sharing all that. That'll be relevant again in just a few minutes when we get to the next section. But, you know, what do we do about all these issues? Well, I probably don't have to really convince y'all what to do, because you're a part of a community group. You're taking a stand on a daily basis in your personal lives and your professional lives. But just to say it simply, as a grassroots organization, we really do believe that if we work together and get to know our community members, we can find this type of common ground. We can find shared motivation and shared power, poder, together. And if we're raising our voice as a group, as EPAC or members of Cultivando already do, or as individuals, we can really make sure that our elected officials listen to us. We see them as our elected followers, not just our elected leaders. They should be following the lead of the people and the preference and opinion of the people. So all of that kind of gets us to the real essence of the workshop tonight, which is the public comment, something you've probably heard before. So we're just going to do a little bit of basic overview of it before we get into practicing, because you all were already exhibiting that you're good at giving public comment. You were telling your story, you were pointing to the problems, and this will all hopefully come full circle in just a few minutes. So just a few notes on what is public comment. It started in 1946 with President Roosevelt with the Administrative Protection Act, because he and many others saw at the time the issue on the horizon that certain regulatory bodies, agencies, or committees might end up with a lot of unchecked power to do whatever the heck they want without hearing from community members, without hearing how this is going to impact them, whatever the thing is. So to try to put it simply, whenever there's an issue that requires a vote, or there's a proposed change in regulation, a proposed law, ones you maybe heard here in the city. Actually, Rosemary sang about the 2 oil and gas pads. That is something that's up for public comment as an opportunity to say either you're for or against it. And the responsible committee or agency, they request public comment. They technically have to by law. So it's an opportunity for us to show up and really make sure our voices are heard so we can see the changes we want or the protections that we want. And I just wanted to call out too that general public comment opportunities are typically available on a weekly or every other week or monthly basis in your community or your city. I'm pretty positive in Commerce City, there's 2 opportunities a month to do that. And we'll share more about that towards the end. But it's just really important to know that public comment does strengthen the decision that these groups make. You all on EPAC are also decision makers ultimately in providing guidance and insight to where things should move with the community in mind. And yeah, ultimately the goal is just to make sure that we're informing these people. We're giving them as much information and perspective as possible so that they can make informed community-based decisions. Too often, we all see where the community is not taken into account when decisions are made about certain things. So yeah, civic engagement and participation in our democratic system is one of the most powerful ways that we can secure change. And we know that we're in a time where we're led to believe that our voice may not matter, but hopefully today you will abandon that idea and really believe that your voice does matter. If you don't use it, they will always win every single time. So just a general overview of how public comment works. Usually that agency says, all right, we're going to collect public comment for either 14 days up to 90 days. So sometimes you have a very small amount of time to raise your voice about it. Sometimes you have a few months, but there is almost always a deadline to sign up by. And if you don't meet the deadline, you may not get to share your public comment. So good to just keep that in mind as you plan your time. And usually folks will prepare their comments in advance of the hearing and practice them. It's kind of like this workshop tonight. We practiced this beforehand to get a feel for it and know that it might feel scary, but it shouldn't be when you're telling your story and you're speaking from your heart and your experience. And almost always too, there is a visible timer that is counting down from 2 or 3 minutes, presenting some urgency for you to give your public comment within. And if you don't, we'll talk about that later too. They will probably cut you off and move on to the next person. So this is just some kind of standard information to include in a public comment. Feel free to use the paper as you all already are to start jotting down answers to some of these questions, starting to form what you will have to do here shortly around developing your own practice public comment. So yeah, introduce yourself, where you live and for how long. I'm gonna remember that Trudy's lived here for 30 years. Hearing that, that's impactful. Are you for or against the proposal? Of course, you wanna tell them that and why or why not. And state your personal experience. Say what you have seen and felt and witnessed in your community. How has it affected you and your neighbors and your loved ones? And what are your concerns or complaints? Are there changes that you want to see? Do you have ideas about improving the idea or the proposed law, or the proposed regulation? And it's important to be polite and thank them for their time and consideration at the end. It's an easy way to end your statement. Gracias por tu tiempo. Thank you for listening to me today. So this is just some example language. Hopefully it's not too hard to read. But the Environmental Law Institute has a really fantastic guide about giving good public comment. And you all will get these slides after this is done, so you can explore, check out links, read more. But yeah, in the first column there, suggestions for content. It's really effective to identify actual violations in the law, which is often easy to do with giving public comment. Using specific language when you can. So just really get to the point about the issue. That's what we're talking about. And use examples. Back to this piece. Use examples from your experience. And in the second column, just some style and formatting techniques. You can do as much or as little of this as you feel comfortable doing, but you can highlight major concerns early on. You're going to get your point across faster, which is really effective. You can use topic sentences, perhaps, but overall, just convey a respectful message. So you might want to say you call yourself the EPA, but you may not get them to listen as much as if you just pointed out that they're not doing enough, that they are not rising up to the occasion, that they need to do more. You can say those things in a respectful way. That's not an impossible thing to do. So with that, I will pass it to Valley, and we're close to practicing now.
Thank you, Chelsea. So Chelsea has, really all of you have talked about what are our stories, our personal stories. Why are we here today? And what I would like to do is just jump in a little bit more and talk about how do we make our story of self? How do we effectively talk to people? How do we convince them of what we've gone through and why that matters? So I think it's really important to remember that you don't need to be an expert for your story to be impactful. You don't need to be a scientist. And the 30 years was a great example of that's a story that resonates with people, that people want to hear and can bring about change. So the other really important thing is that there's 15 of us here, but our stories can also impact other people that are in the community outside of this room, because that's really the goal, is to get the whole community engaged and everyone involved so that everyone can tell their story. So before we go any further, maybe she doesn't need an introduction. But I do want to say for myself, before I even knew what 350 was and became involved in the organization, as a student, I discovered Lucy's story online on the internet, and it was a great example of someone's story that I don't even know that impacted me. So I just wanted to have her come up and to tell her story as an example of this 2 to 3 minute format and how to make your own story, which we're going to do shortly. Lucy?
Gracias. Thank you so much. Well, I had mentioned earlier, I was in testifying right now, ¿verdad? Estaba testificando. And I could probably, do you want, quiere usted traducir o lo hago bilingüe, Spanglish? Because a lot of people know I.
Es más fácil que se usa una sola lengua.
Okay,
La que
English.
usted escoja.
English, pues. Vamos a do English so you can, para que le pueda traducir ahí. I do Spanglish sometimes. So, pero,
Porque luego yo no,
sí.
no las capto y sigo hablando.
So thank you so much, Valley. Gracias. I'm very humbled, actually. Y todos mis vecinas here, all my neighbors. I mentioned earlier that I was in testifying, and I've been showing up for a long time for us, right? I didn't know none of this. I had no idea all the stuff that we're learning today. I had to find out on my own. I had to like open my own doors, right? I had to like figure out who to talk to, where to go. Why? Because my local city council didn't listen to me, right? All I asked for was an air monitor. I just was asking for air monitors, little or $50 air monitors that they could put in our homes, right? All of us that live around the refineries or even the fracking facilities, right? Just like, hey, what are we smelling, right? What is that smell? Because my kids were getting sick. They were having the bloody noses. They were having the migraines. My mom is a diabetic. We have a lot of health impacts. My grandma died of leukemia, and we're still fighting cancer. So I thought it was just me, embrujada, some kind of voodoo. But knocking and organizing, talking to all my neighbors, all my vecinas, I realized it wasn't just me. It was, some of my neighbors were going through worse things. I met one of my neighbors, 30 years old, brain cancer, 50 years old, stomach cancer. That is not normal, okay? We have normalized it, all right? So that's why I started speaking up, right? Showing up at the spaces. I know I don't have a lot of time to speak right now, but I spoke about the 2 minute, 3 minutes. That was the hardest thing for me, okay? That we have 3 minutes or 2 minutes to speak. Sometimes they'll let you go over, but they mentioned to get to the point, right? Like for me, it's personal, right? Because it's my life. It's my community, it's my children. So I speak about what I'm going through. What am I experiencing as a mom, right? That I don't sleep at night sometimes. That's why I look like this. And I get very emotional about this because at first I didn't know my kids were sick. I didn't believe them, I thought it was, they were lying. They just didn't want to go to school. So that's why I started showing up, was because my kids were getting sick. The school, I was having issues with the school. And then I realized, hey, it's not just me, and I reached out to a local organization, to Cultivando, to help me, because my city didn't listen, my mayor didn't listen. I started going to spaces where I could be heard. Sharing your story is really important, not only for us, but also for people that don't know. I realized that even our commissioners on AQCC, CDPHE, they didn't know. They were shocked. They've been driving through here for 30 years and they smell it, but they never stop. And that was their job.
Their job was to find out what was that funk that we have been smelling for 30, 50, 70 years already. Almost a century. We have been going through that. And now the North is getting fracked, right? So it's so important to share your story because there's really good people out there, even the people that don't know. They want to help us. There's people that want to help us. They're helping us now. So even if you think it might be stupid or, oh, nobody wants to hear my story, it's a sad story, whatever, they need to hear it. Because up to now, all they care about is money, you know, costs. How much is it gonna cost me to do air monitoring? How much is it gonna cost me to protect your community? You know, we're worth it, you know, so we need to start valuing ourselves and our communities so we can bring forth justice. And that's what I do, just share your story, you know, whatever, if it's, you know, your mom, your children, you, whatever, if you're a survivor, speak, you know what I mean? They need to hear you. And I don't know if that's good for now, pero I get emotional porque me da coraje.
Yeah, so, wow. Hard to come up after that. But what I was hoping that we could do to build upon that is to really take a moment for each of us here to share our own story in the same way that Lucy did, because as she said so well, it's really, really important that people hear that. And we've already kind of started on this already. We've already heard some really, really great stories so far, but we kind of wanted to give everyone a chance to practice as if you were actually giving public comment. And like Lucy said, there is that strict time limit. So what I wanted to do was give you a few things to think about as you're coming up with your story, and then we can all share with the people around us. And so the first thing to really think about is, how did this start for you? Why are you here in this room? And again, we've all shared some of that already, but that's a great way to build your story of self, the story that you're bringing here to your public comment. And along the way, what were your challenges? What were your successes? And what choices did you have to make? And then we want to take that and we want to draw it into us. How does that relate not only to the people in the room, but to the people in the community and the people in the entire world? What does that mean for them? And lastly, what does that mean for now, today? What action needs to be taken based on the story that you've gone through and how it relates to other people? So this is like a really basic format, and I was hoping that as we do this, we try and focus in on one story. It could be an event, it could be a place, or it could be a person. It could be, you know, being in this room today maybe brought something to your mind. So we really want to try and keep it somewhat narrow and focus in one area. So I think we can take maybe 5 to 10 minutes and just with the people around you, talk about what your story is, again, why you're here, and then we'll come back and see if people want to share.
Question which we can hear. Being a mom with young kids, my husband has been always home in time for me to get down to the city council meeting to give a public comment in person. At times I've given it like a written comments. Do you think that's as effective, less effective, better than nothing, I guess, to give public comment that way?
I mean, definitely the latter. I know that there's a public comment coming up that they're only offering it via Zoom. And sometimes that it happens that way. So I think whatever way is available and whatever way you can make it work. I do think that Lucy's testimony was really a testimony to the power of being there in person and saying something, even if it's, you know, in Zoom, kind of in person. But any way that you can do it is important and powerful. If you have a choice, it's probably easier to, like, you know, show up on Zoom or in person as opposed to writing. It takes a lot less time to draft that. but also you can always write it out beforehand, and then you have that, you know, as notes for yourself when you give testimony. Does that answer your question? Okay. So great. So yeah, like I said, we will take a little bit of time here, and
I just wanna, what is it? Is Sprite for cancer, but I don't know if for water or iron or something. I don't blame it for that, but I got cancer in one of my kidneys, and I take it out, but so right now, but I don't know if it's with water or whatever.
yeah, well, I think those links, they can be sometimes tough, you know. You don't know if it's because of this or because of that, but perhaps with your own story, there's something that you've seen in your community that has impacted you, or you've seen someone else go through that you thought maybe was related to Suncor or related to bad drinking water. And yeah, it's your story doesn't always have to be your story. So by that, I mean, it can be stories that you've seen other people, like things like, again, for me, a story is listening to Lucy's story. That's a story that I can share with other people, if that makes sense.
So one thing with this EPAC group is we're gonna come up with these recommendations. And one of the recommendations from Darcy, which I think is an amazing recommendation, is to do a biomarker study. So when you do a biomarker study, you take blood or saliva, and then this way we can say, Darcy has kidney cancer, Rosemary has stomach cancer, and then you have a record of the community's health, not just one person's health, because as he stated, like, it's really hard to make this connection between one person's cancer or the lag time, and it's really hard legally to prove that, but if you have this community health indicator, so that's one of the things. So everybody can like write on the weekly survey, like, oh, I think a biomarker study should be funded. And that's why we have that community survey up, and people can put in specific things for that, and that flyers in the back. So you just, and it's also on the website.
Sorry, and I'm gonna, so, and also on that, we can state that we're against the tabs that are coming up for the fracking up there. So we can go against on doing that. So actually, I might, maybe if 350 wants to help us to come up with some talking points for my neighbors, because that's really how we get guided sometimes.
We have some information actually on that.
So yeah, I guess we did practice already.
No, that's, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important that the collective stories that we have to bring to the table are really important. And I will say that, for example, you're wondering, how has this affected me? I'm not quite sure. There is a lot of information that we know about the chemicals that Suncor is putting out. We know, maybe we don't know if it's affected us personally, but we know in general things like benzene and these PFAS chemicals, they're bad for humans. That's been proven. But the people that we're going against have a very, very vested interest in trying to weaken that link as much as possible. And that's why really we're here today, is if we just let them continue doing what they're doing, they're going to be like, there is no link here. So we need people to gather together to prove that there is a link. And that's really important. So let's give this a shot. Let's see what happens. And like I said, we've already shared some stories, but this is just a good chance to practice. So turn to someone around you and tell your story. And there's not a hard and fast format, but share the reason why you're here. And we'll come back in
5-ish.
5-ish minutes?
Yeah,
5,
getting
6
close to
minutes?
the end.
Yeah. All right, great.
That's good though, it's moving building someone, you need that. Anyone.
Just because she told me this. Said, I told her I was at the.
Yes.
She called You're not even there, but over there.
All right. I hope we all had a chance. Sorry to rush everyone. Okay, great. Okay, great. So, some of us have already shared our stories. Sorry. So no, go ahead. It's all right. Great. So it sounds like we had some productive storytelling. Okay. So we are running a little bit behind, but I would love to hear maybe from someone that has not shared any part of their story yet. Would love to hear from someone anything that they would like to share with their story in a couple minutes, if anyone's interested.
Rosemary hasn't told her story yet. I don't have a custody one, so I would like to hear other people's, because I want to put stories in our sustainability.
I just want to make a comment, not necessarily sorry, because I am new, but I wanted to thank the community that's already been here, doing the work. See, for years doing this and being welcoming to people coming in that want to get involved instead of saying, you don't know what's going on, and instead teaching and helping people through Mondo.
Yeah.
Obviously the city.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that speaks to, and this is a story in itself. Someone talked about the language access. That is a story in itself. The fact that you don't have a venue and maybe you aren't able to communicate yourself. That's a story of environmental injustice. So the story, just to be clear about it, it doesn't have to be, I know someone that got sick because of Suncor. It's, I want to be able to talk about pollution, but no one will listen to me. That is a story in itself. So thank you for sharing that. So yeah, does anyone?
I do have a story now that I think.
Okay.
Just in case people don't know. So last week, or the past 3 weeks, we've had 2 big wins because of Suncor. One was their fence line monitoring plan. So for the people that submitted comments, thank you, because it was the strictest requirements that they've had in like 20 years.
Wow.
So they were gonna have to, there's 189, they're called caps. They were gonna monitor 3, now they're gonna monitor 14. They were gonna monitor half the facility, now they have to monitor all along. They said they couldn't monitor along Brighton Avenue because of all the cars. So I said, we know how many cars go, we can extrapolate that VFT, and then we know what benzene is from Suncor. And then the other one was they have to monitor every 5 minutes. And so now Suncor is going to try to sue the state. I don't think they could win. But it said, if you read the article, it was from Total Comments. And so I know Lucy did it and some of her neighbors did it. Thank you. And then we had another one about the water. So we went to the Water Commission and there was 2 sides. There was Suncor, Coors, and the Metro District wastewater treatment plant. They were saying these streams are, so there's 3 kinds of streams, 1, 2, and 3. One's the best, one's like 5. 2 is medium, 3, it's considered very dirty. And so when they give out permits, if it's very dirty, then they go, okay, we should let them discharge what they want. So they had put all our Sand Creek, Burlington Ditch, the South Platte as 3. So we went and we petitioned to say, no, this should be 2. We can restore this water. How? So we won that one. Tomorrow, the vice president of Suncor has invited me there. So if you don't see me at
Like, that was in person. I was before, I know where you're at.
Turn your
Where you
location
gonna
on.
Yeah, turn on your location.
actually, this is how dangerous it is. The instructions for visiting Suncor is you back up. They said you don't put your car in, you back up so if there's an emergency. And the other thing is you have to wear a hydrogen badge.
But they're not putting out.
No.
Oh my goodness, already seated there.
So, I think well, maybe I invited myself, but I think that they know now, that some people are. And
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
thank you.
Cool.
Rosemary.
Awesome. Well, are you up next?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna bring, I think my point was made and we all got to do some storytelling. And I want to take all of this synergy and all of the, these feelings, these strong feelings, and I got to talk with y'all. And it's so great to sit down and listen to someone's story that you don't know and be like, wow, that is really impactful. So the last thing I'll say before we move on is bringing other people in is really important outside of this room and sharing your story with them. That's really, really important. So that's why you have to remember that your voice matters and your story is important. So I will finish on that and we'll talk a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you, Valley. And thank you all for being so open and vulnerable and being able to share in this space. We really appreciate you all. So right now we're going to get a little bit more into like the nitty gritty of giving public comments. And I know Valley had identified that we're going a little bit over. So if there's anything that you want more information on, contact us after this. You all are going to get the slides and a video of this recording as well. But there's definitely support to come after this meeting as well. So 3 ways to give public comments in person. So for example, I know a lot of city councils now have the opportunity to go back and speak in person, give your testimony there, go up to the podium. Virtually, this has become very, very popular since COVID. So joining a Zoom chat, a Google Meet, video, things like that. An example of that is the CDPHE, since they're statewide, will often have these virtual meetings so that everyone around the state can participate. And then lastly is written comment. So usually that will be collected via email, Google form, written letter, something of the type. An example of that is Suncor, their Title V permits. They always have the option to collect written permit that way as well. Or excuse me, written comments. So these are just examples of some of the groups who you may find yourself giving public comment to. The CDPHE, which you probably hear us speak a lot about, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, has 6 different divisions. And within those different divisions, there's some that are more popular than others, some that you may be giving comment to more often than others. These are just a couple of examples. So the AQCC, or the Air Quality Control Commission, is another agency that we often see collecting public comments. This also at a state level, the COGCC collects public comment about fracking, new and proposed wells. And then what you all have been focusing on at a local level, city council, and also at a federal level, the EPA, giving public comments that way as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a typical audience. Something to note, a lot of times we don't expect this, but people who work in the industry, such as the oil and gas industry, will often be either present in person or on these virtual calls. So something to be aware of. They may be participating, they may not, but definitely not something to be intimidated by. Spanish and other potential language interpretation should be available at every hearing in the state of Colorado. So you are able to comment in the language that's most comfortable for you. During the hearing, whether it's in person or virtual, wait for your name to be called and then head up to the podium if it's in person. If it's a virtual hearing, they should call your name and see you're present and then either give you the opportunity to unmute yourself or they will be able to unmute you. And at that time, you can give comments. So a couple tips and tricks. Everyone's nervous the first time they give public comment. If you're nervous at all, try practicing alone, writing it down. You can always read off of the script. And just, yeah, keep in mind that you're doing important work. Sharing your comments respectfully, make sure that you always cite or include your sources just to build up a reputation. And if you ever need any support, organizations like 350 Colorado, Cultivando as well, I know provide a lot of support and talking points and toolkits, which can always be referenced. You can always reach out to people from those organizations for help as well. So talking for a minute specifically about virtual comments. Since this is something that's new to a lot of people, it was something new to me when I started working virtually. I find it makes people a little less nervous to have some tips. You can have your camera off during the whole virtual meeting, even when you're speaking. Just something to make sure is that your name reflects the name that you signed up with so that they're aware of your presence. Depending on the meeting, oftentimes there can be a presentation before. They should make you aware of that though. And in that case, be prepared for a 30 to 60-minute presentation before they start calling names for public comments. At the same time, make sure you're present and listening. If your name is called, there is a possibility that you could be skipped over. This has actually happened to me before, and I found that if you are skipped over for any reason, if you weren't paying attention for a second, just entering the chats and chatting them and saying, hey, sorry, missed my name, can I speak again? Oftentimes they'll be able to look back to you. When your time limit is up, someone will let you know, so feel free to keep talking until then. As long as you have more to say, keep talking until they tell you to stop. And then just to note that not every opportunity is straightforward. Usually the agency will send you out more information, but every opportunity is different. And then just speaking for a second about, we've talked a lot about giving public comment and why it's important, but just speaking for a second about times that it's really worked out for us. I'm sure a lot of you in this room are aware, but Suncor's Title V permit for Plant 2 was denied by the EPA for environmental justice concerns. That was only the second time in the history of EPA they've denied a Title V permit. And the first time, I think that refinery ended up becoming a super fun site. So that was a huge deal. And being able to speak with EPA members, they told us that a lot of it was because the community came out and raised their voices so loud that it was impossible to deny. Some of you may be aware this is actually a Denver-specific initiative, but the Pay-As-You-Throw Waste Management Initiative that an organization called EcoCycle spearheaded. That was a very close vote, and they had a ton of people, which you can actually see in this photo, show up to speak on behalf of the initiative. And that was eventually why it passed their city council, was people speaking there that day. And then also more recently, Xcel closing their Pueblo 3 coal plant early. That also was due to a lot of outreach to city council, to local and statewide politicians, just people raising their voices in general. And there are a lot more successes of public comment where that has come from, but I'm going to pass it over to Chelsea again to round us out.
3 more slides and we're there. So yeah, hopefully you've seen that public comment works. Raising our voice works. Sometimes we're not given a lot of evidence that it does, but you can't lose faith that it is impactful and powerful. And you all are the expert on your community, your experiences, and hopefully now more of an expert on giving public comment and maybe sharing it with someone in your life. And just knowing that the more that we listen to community members that are the most affected, that deal with the nosebleeds, the asthma, the fracking pads, if their voices are raised and prioritized in this process, we will move towards a more just, sustainable future. And like Vic said a moment ago, the more people give comment, the stronger the message. Those things are on public record. So if a group moved forward with an idea, but there was on record over 200 public comments that said no, they're set up potentially for a lawsuit in the future, which is potentially what needs to happen. So we started to talk about this earlier, that the goal that we heard from Lucy and from others was to get the EPAC group to be able to show up to a future city council meeting perhaps, and ask to be a permanent committee, not to dissolve. Our voices are not meant to be dissolved after a year of being together. They're meant to carry on and continue informing. So you all have a lot in common to share, and making a shared public comment, perhaps, like Rosemarie mentioned. So you might already know that Commerce City City Council, they have regular meetings on the first and third Mondays of each month, just to give general public comment. You do have to register on Zoom at noon on that date. If you do that, try to do it afterwards, you're not gonna get in. So maybe set a timer in your phone. Register for public comment before noon today. And because you're gonna get these slides, you'll have access to that link. You probably looked at it, but the Commerce City City Council link that gives more details about their in-person meetings, their Zoom meetings, submitting written comment, how they want you to do that. And yeah, just making sure that you all get that follow-up email from us. I think we got everyone's email on our little clipboard up front, but we'll follow up and send you, yeah, all these details and everything else you need to either give public comment to Commerce City soon, or identify, I think as Rosemarie said, something on October 9th, another opportunity to give public comment. So.
Yeah, could I just add, so I've been working on the website, so whenever there's like the surveys on the website now, so if you just search Commerce City and environment, there's information about EPAC, there's information about the community surveys, about the business outreach, the community event,
Perfect.
and they can always email.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone knows you have lots of resources and support to give you everything you need, hopefully, to feel confident, ready to give public comment. So thank you all so.
Tengo una pregunta acerca de el comentario que hizo de que nos quería mandar las diapositivas. Y yo quería preguntar si sería algo muy complicado si nos las mandaran en español.
Yes, yes, yeah, exactly.
Muchas gracias, porque nosotros como promotores tenemos conversaciones con la comunidad y podemos tal vez invitar si hay alguien que me gustaría dar un comentario para que podamos tener como un poquito más de texto acerca de la importancia y cómo se manejaría la preparación.
Entiendo. Perfecto,
And
sí,
people that
podemos.
comment in Spanish, last night, probably more people had comments in Spanish than usually for Monday.
Gracias.
Pero más recursos también en español. Sí, vamos a hacerla.
So you have to sign up.
Back
I
and
always
forth.
forget when you switch.
I'm sorry.
You have to sign up on Zoom to speak even if you're gonna be there in person?
No,
No.
good question.
And then the other thing I wanted to share is something I heard the hard way.
Oh.
I spoke to city council many times during a period of time somewhere back. And finally, one day I got up, I said my name down, that's like I was supposed to. Then I looked at each of them and I just flashed it with smoke. And it was amazing, the difference.
That's a good
I don't know
idea.
whether it just reassured me or what.
Yeah,
It was like a completely different view.
that's a great piece of advice. Disarming them a little bit, getting them to listen. Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Any other questions? These are great. I'm glad we were able to answer too as we went along, but
And I'm very sorry we didn't have pizza. The consultant was supposed to.
Did you ask him? Because I'm thinking like somebody got some pizza from Vice Rich. Because this was supposed to be closed.
You know what, I think it is that, I think they're all at a conference.
well, then a double, triple thank you for everyone coming tonight and bringing your full self and sharing, and any feedback that you want to share, either one-to-one or via email with us. We're all ears. This is not the last one. It was the first one like this, but it's not the last one. So you all will help make us stronger.
Two things, maybe one, because, Guadalupe asked about the Spanish, is that maybe we could also do a Spanish training, or the Spanish community